Dr. Kaushik Murali. He is going to be talking on using public speaking skills to teach.
Slide. Yeah. Thank you. So luckily I have my slides. But you just saw an example of how public speaking can get you out of a sticky spot with what Dr. Prashant just did, where he didn't have any slides, but he took us through a 10-minute journey of AI. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some slides to possibly learn how to be like Dr. Prashant in terms of using this skill. Invariably, most of our students walk out of the classroom with that quote in mind, where I know that you believe that you understood what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. Most conversations end up being that way, and this is a very famous quote by a senior statesperson from the US government. And public speaking skills, irrespective of whether you're an orator or not, or like me, an introvert who would feel a butterflies in the stomach every time you're up, you need to figure out a way to kind of walk it through. What is public speaking? Essentially, it's the activity of speaking on a subject to a varied group of people. This could be anybody in the audience. So it's an activity, like I mentioned, of speaking to a group of people. And why does it matter? Phobia of social interaction ranks number one, much more than fear of spiders, snakes, flying, whatever else that you thought you were scared of. Social interaction scares a majority of us, much worse than fear of hospitals and also fear of injections that we think our patients have. Majority of us who love to teach would love to be like the other side, where we think we have a very engaged audience or very thrilled to bits about what we are sharing and are just waiting to hear. This happens when you are a real expert in the field, but when you have some expertise and you go on and on with slides or didactic sessions, invariably you have your classroom that is kind of sleeping. Now, where do you learn public speaking? It is not taught to us as a part of curriculum, but one of the best ways to pick it up is to look at the TED Talks. So this is a platform where you have people speaking on a variety of topics, which often are completely disconnected with what we do. They just take a concept and walk you through. I've just pulled out some of these points or highlights that is from the speaker guide of a TED Talk, where they say that first and foremost, get familiar with what a TED Talk is. So get familiar whether it's a flipped classroom, whatever session you're doing, whether it's a session like this. Second, you need to develop an idea. What is it that you want to communicate? Once you've done that, you need to have a very clear outline and preferably in your mind, or if required, draft out literally a script that you can actually talk about it. Then you go about creating the slides. Invariably, we do it the other way around. We make slides and then decide what we want to talk because the slide is there. Of course, you need to rehearse. It's very difficult to take it on the fly. If it is a topic where you're very confident your audience has no clue, then yes, you can wing it. Otherwise, by and large, you need to rehearse about it. Invariably, something will go wrong. Your slides won't come on, your audiovisual will not work, you may not have an audience, you may think you're a radio jockey, but then you've got to calm yourself. You need to inhale, exhale, and assuming you've practiced it, you then go ahead with it, and hopefully you walk away unhurt and people appreciating for what you've done. In most lectures, and they're called lectures because they start off with somebody literally pontificating to us, saying that today I'm going to talk to you about amblyopia. The minute we say that, the kids have switched off. But rather, if you said that, you know what, imagine if we were talking of a problem that affects the population of Egypt. Don't you think it's important for us to have a conversation about? Because essentially that's the kind of, if you took the India at-risk population of amblyopia, it's equivalent to the population of Egypt. So immediately they've got a construct of saying, oh my God, it's a huge problem. So the children population of Karnataka, where I come from, is equal to the population of Bangladesh. So the minute I tell them, you know what, 4% of children have refractive error. If I say, look, we are trying to solve a problem that is 4% of Bangladesh, do you think it is important? Automatically that statistic kind of sticks to them. It becomes an anecdote that they can then reference to. Any talk, by and large, any lecture has to have this kind of a framework, where you start off with an attention statement that kind of gets your audience awake. You can use something to stun and shock them, or hopefully keep them engaged to the rest of your session. It then flows through an introduction where you're telling what you're intending to cover as a part of your talk, the actual body, conclusion, and preferably when you're in a classroom session, what do you want the students to do after that lecture? It could be a answer key that they go back, or you tell them saying you want to hear a better talk, go to DigiNerve possibly. But by and large, what is that residual intent that you want them to go? Do you want them to go to the wet lab? Do you want them to come back with some session, maybe make an Instagram reel and share it on the WhatsApp group that you have the residents, so that you understand that they've understood what you want them to actually carry back. The key is to understand your audience. So you cannot use the same set of slides for a variety of students. The way you would address your colleagues, to the way you would address students, to the way you would address peers is very, very different. And it's very critical that your talk is about the audience, and it is not for you to show off your own knowledge to them. So you have to be very careful about the language that you use, the level of information that you intend to convey, and you need to organize it in a particular pattern so that they walk out understanding the key concepts that you wanted them to gather. I'm following up a session on technology. I've used some AI in the images that I've generated, but again, it's very important that we use the technology and not the other way around. And again, it is very important to ensure that the slides actually supports our talk rather than the other way around. So slides should have as minimal content as possible. They should be high contrast like this so that it is easy for the person to read, and where possible should form an outline rather than us reading, looking at it, in which case you've turned your back to the audience and you've completely lost them. Putting references on the slide is great because again it shows that this is content that you've researched and put together and not something that is your own personal anecdote. We heard from Pranesh about why attention is important. Every TED Talk is formatted to 18 minutes. And why is it that way? They've done research to show that that is pretty much the active time that you can engage a person with a single concept or an idea. So in a classroom session, it's not a bad idea to kind of break it up into two parts, where your key conversation or key content you're delivering in 18 minutes, maybe have an activity. It could be a poll. We learned about various interactive tools here today. Put that in as a bridge and then summarize it with not so heavy content right at the end. Many of us are not great speakers, so we may not be very good with our diction or the vocabulary. But this 55-38-7 formula holds good in that only 7% of what you talk is judged based on the words that you speak. 38% is based on how you deliver it or how your voice is perceived. And 55% of it is based on your nonverbal language. That's how you're moving your hands about, whether you're maintaining eye contact and all of that. So the words that you choose to speak is actually a very, very small portion of your entire speech and talk. Now, when we say that a majority is how you talk and how you kind of engage, the nonverbal behavior, we have a tendency to kind of cram in whatever we know in the time frame that we have, and we tend to speak very fast. This can also happen when you're a little tense. Or sometimes you're in a monotone where you're not enthusiastic about it at all, and your audience can actually smell it. So it's important for you to be natural, have your own persona, because it's very difficult to fool them every time that you're delivering a talk, and where possible, see if you can actually have a conversation with them. Like I said, voice really, really matters. Varying your pitch is very important, and it is very good to have some pauses in between to allow the audience to kind of reflect on what they have heard and imbibe it. And also sometimes you need to emphasize whatever you think as a key message. So if you're saying voice is important, it is important for you to emphasize on that so that they can carry that back. We often get lost for words, or we fumble where we use filler words. So, so if you listen to your own recording, you will find those one or two words that you typically use or mannerisms that you use. Again, talk to your residents. They possibly have noticed it. They possibly have cracked jokes about you amongst their group. It's very useful to know whether you want to leverage that as your strength and continue that, or whether you want to do something about it and avoid it in your future engagements. So being familiar with the material is very key because it then avoids the necessity of you having to keep looking at your slides, but rather allows you to look up. Using laser pointers is a good way to kind of point it, but again, reading each word or pointing out each word again doesn't make sense. Turning to this back to your screen and reading off it is a definite no-no. So you need to face your audience, and I think that is a key learning from any public speaker that you can pick up, in that the way they kind of scan the room and work it up. In terms of non-verbal language, I think these are some key aspects. A podium like this is great when you're jittery because it allows you to anchor. You can put your hands on the podium and your nerves invariably will come. It's the initial 30 seconds that you need to kind of get past, beyond which you go away. When you're speaking outside, it is very important to keep your hands to yourself because that shows that you're a little bit more trustworthy rather than putting your arms out where you're kind of preaching to the world. So you have to be very careful about where your hands are. So holding a basketball kind of thing, you would typically would see a lot of Barack Obama do that a lot, where literally it's like he's holding a basketball when he's doing any of his public addresses. So that kind of shows that you are in command of the situation. And often your classroom will get unruly, so putting your hands down helps you kind of do it. The next category that you can pick up is actually from stand-up comics. So there is a thesis dissertation done on this where they've seen as to what teachers can learn from stand-up comics. So every stand-up comics does crowd work. They read the room, they try to understand, they improvise very quickly because the minute they see that the audience is sleeping, they kind of switch back to something that's worked for them in the past, and they quickly move around. And invariably, they will pick on an audience member and interact and engage with them. So any stand-up comic, he'll pick on the person in the front, a persona, and kind of imbibe some humor. So it's very, very important as a teacher to kind of engage with your students very directly. Giving your audience a vote is important. They'll invariably ask for a show of hands of saying, how many of you have like idli dosa vada or something like that, and maybe pick on you for a joke subsequently. But giving the audience a voice and participating is very important. The last bit is a very tricky thing. Often when you're self-depreciating and you crack a joke about yourself, you become much more human to your students. But it can again backfire. So you need to understand your audience and be very careful about how you use it. Of course, rehearsing is very critical to make sure that you avoid some of those filler words. Again, whether you're using your voice and hands effectively. You can, Malcolm Gladwell has shown, saying that 10,000 hours of work makes you an expert. So there's nothing that beats practice. It will not make you perfect, but it will definitely make you better. So again, to conclude, a teacher is an effective communicator who's always thinking about improving his or her presentation skills. So once again, grateful to Dr. Meenakshi, the scientific committee and OEPF for inviting me for this talk.